I'll go ahead and start. Thank you so much for joining me today in this interview. Before we start, I'll introduce myself. I'm Ahlam Qerqez. I'm a fifth-year graduate student in the chemical engineering department at UT Austin. And I currently work with Dr. Jennifer Maynard in developing protein therapeutics and antibody therapeutics. But before that, my journey, I actually was a biomedical engineer. I also graduated from UT Austin from biomedical engineering. And throughout my degree path, I did undergraduate research in Dr. George Ju's lab, which is primarily a chemical engineering background laboratory. And so throughout my time there, I noticed, or I kind of saw how a lot of the chemical engineering principles and, that educational background actually helped in the problem-solving skills in a lab that was mostly bio or immunology. So in that lab, they take a lot of those engineering skill sets and they apply them to biology. And so that kind of motivated me to continue my Ph.D. in chemical engineering and apply that as well to immunology and biology. And so with that, I want to kind of give you the opportunity to, talk about your, academic background in chemical engineering and how that kind of led you to your current career path.
Sure. So I did my bachelor's, master's, and PhD all in chemical engineering. So my bachelor's was done in India at the Indian Institute of Technology at Delhi. And then thereafter, I was given a fellowship to come to UT. And I accepted that. UT was a highly regarded chemical engineering school, even back then, and certainly is now. So I had been interested initially in environmental engineering, and that was what my statement of purpose was written on. But coming to UT, I realized that there was not a lot going on environmental engineering. So then my kind of other interests were in life sciences. And I'd always had sort of a soft spot for medicine, but didn't quite have the stomach to go into medical school full time. So, and I was sort of interested in polymers. And so that combination, there was a project being offered by Dr. Jeffrey Hubble. So Jeff and finally, as you mentioned, George Yu, were both actually recruited by UT around the same time. So George's lab was right across from our lab and stuff. And so we got to know each other quite well. So in that process, there was a project being offered by Dr. Hubble, which was for absorbable polymer for prevention of post-surgical adhesions or scarring after gynecological surgery. And I knew nothing about gynecological surgery. I barely knew anything about polymers. But Jeff was a good mentor. He showed me how to do this. And after a few lab explosions later, where I had to clean up a lot of the exploded polymers and stuff and some other disasters, I managed to make some absorbable materials that absorbed in the 7 to 10 day time frame. And we did some clinical work in rabbits with one of Jeff's friends from Baylor University, who's a gynecological surgeon, Dr. Randy Dunn. And we did the models, did really work very well, unfortunately. They still gave me my master's degree and I graduated with that. But I kept in the back of my mind, I've always been persistent that I want to make sure that I don't leave anything unfinished. So the business should not be unfinished. So after graduating, I didn't have a green card. I didn't have any work authorization. So I tried looking for a job and I applied to 30 places. All chemical companies of various sorts that still probably come to the UT campus, which was sort of the primary path for most folks to go work for Chevron, Exxon, Eastman, Kodak, Dow, DuPont, kinds of companies. They all turned me down because I didn't have any work authorization. So at that point, I was at a crossroads, whether to head back to India and, where I had some good job opportunities, or to try to do something else. And what that something else would be was to go further and do my PhD. So I spoke to Jeff Hubble, and he was a great mentor, very thoughtful, very astute individual, and also a good rising star in his own right. And he was doing wonderful stuff. So he had a couple of good ideas that he wanted to pursue for graduate studies, and he offered those up to me, and I decided to continue and press on for my PhD. So that's what got me down this particular path, and that turned into a couple of companies. We came up with methods to photopolymerize materials in contact with living tissue using green lasers and green light. We also created some technology for microencapsulation of insulin secreting cells like islets of Langerhans. And those became two companies. One was the islet company was being set up in California and LA, and the company focused on photopolymerization for surgical sealing and adhesion prevention. By the way, we did get great results with these materials on adhesion prevention. So we did solve that problem. We published that work. And also did some drug delivery work with those materials. We published that too. And this company was then established on the East Coast in Boston. So Jeff went for a 1-year sabbatical out over there, and I joined him as the first employee of the company. So I ended up sort of creating a little job for myself. And that's how I got started down the career from transitioning from academia into industry.
Awesome. Very unconventional stories, but I'm sure, it will inspire a lot of people to, realize like, even if you do get rejected a couple of times, like there's always something greater in store. And so I do want to, back then around that time, I don't believe there was a lot of research done in bio in the chemical engineering labs, or at least the majority of the labs, at least on campus, were mostly like oil industry or, materials. How did it feel like to, how did it feel like to basically approach a problem in biology given your chemical engineering background? Did you feel like it helped? Did you feel like you struggled? Because what's really nice about chemical engineering is you see that it's very multidisciplinary. Like there's a lot of, different avenues you can reach out to with, the skill set. So if you can share your experience with that. Sure.
No, I think in those days, there were just these two professors who were doing anything related to bio, and they were both like young guys who had just come a year or two ago. So to say that there was anything going on in bio would be a big stretch. There were these two, and this, if you just kind of put yourself back in those days, Texas obviously has been a powerhouse in oil and gas separations. Sematech was coming about, microelectronics, and conventional polymers. If you wanted to make ABS and different blends and those types of things, there was a lot going on. But I won't quite say that my project was like a laughing stock kind of a project, but it was close. People were like, "How is this even considered to be engineering? I mean, what is gynecological, adhesions?" And so it was just, it definitely was very different than what people were used to seeing. I think George, you were working on enhanced oil recovery, which people still understood, that using bacteria to be able to squeeze some more juice out of the oil well. I think, people understood that. But for us, doing more biomedical was a little bit more of a stretch. However, I always feel that there is opportunity where there isn't a herd of people already there. So I thought that there was opportunity there, and it turned out to be a great place. We were the avant-garde in that regard. I looked at chemical engineering as saying, look, what do chemical engineers do? This is a hard thing because I don't know how many times I've told various nieces and nephews and stuff to go into chemical engineering, and they all end up in computer science, electrical engineering, including my son who's going to MIT now. But chemical engineering is one of the least understood and highly undervalued discipline because it really teaches you problem solving. And problem solving and being able to marry parallel disciplines of various sorts. Sometimes you're combining chemistry and mechanical engineering. Sometimes you're combining biology you're combining computer science with that. Sometimes you're going into, physics, optics. So you're basically a problem solver who is using whatever tools are required. And as a result of that, if you don't have the tools that the curriculum provides, you need to go take some classes. So I went and took classes in physiology. I took classes in biochemistry. I taught myself when there wasn't a curriculum sort of formally set out as to what needed to be. And Jeff encouraged us to do that. So I think chemical engineering is just that, which is you figure out how to develop a process around something, you figure out how to solve a particular real world problem. And if you have to come up with empirical equations that govern it, then so be it. But I think it really taught me how to tackle real world problems that were meaningful problems. And that lesson has always stuck by me. And I think chemical engineers, that's what they do. They solve real world problems.
Yeah, I completely agree. Definitely, you feel like a lot of times your engineering mindset is more dominant than I know, how much you actually know versus, so it does require that you can solve problems, especially in research. So something that's really interesting to me is the concept of, working in an academic lab and then taking an idea as a grad student and then actually pushing it into, forming your own company. How do you think that transition, or how was that transition for you like to take an idea that was, lab-based and make it into something that, you formed your own company? And I guess if you have anything kind of like encouraging, there are a lot of students or grad students, including myself, that develop their own patents and their own technologies. And sometimes we can't really see beyond the scope of what the university has to offer to us. And so how do you make something, go from, bench to like a whole company?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I think sometimes it pays to be naive. If you don't know what can't be done, you actually go do it, and you realize that even rocket science isn't rocket science. It is when every day you make a little bit of progress, and soon you're making a lot of progress. So I think that's kind of how we approach this. I was lucky. I didn't know anything about startups. Jeff, I have to thank him for that he so how it turned out is that Randy Dunn, who I mentioned was the gynecological surgeon, he knew somebody at Genentech by the name of Margie Moeller. And Margie had worked on TPA delivery, on TPA, tissue planogen, and he came up, they were looking at delivery of that. And so we came up with these materials to be able to deliver it. So long story short, basically that became the nidus for coming up with a company which was focused, which we called Focal, local disease states, being able to tackle it. There were a couple of other founders in that. Bob Langer, who's here from MIT, was a founder. And there was another gentleman out of Tucson who was a founder. And this company came together. The financial backers of was Mayfield Fund, which is a venture capital fund, which had a long-standing relationship also with Genentech, et cetera. So they had been seeking out such technology. So they provided the funding, and I showed up over there one day. They moved me bag and baggage, and I showed up, and they said, build a lab, hire some people. I had no clue how to do any of that, right? Meaning I'd never hired anybody before in my life, and I'd never built a lab in my life. But just got started, made some mistakes definitely along the way. I had when I got started making polymers in the lab myself. But the thing is, my brother, who's a business school professor, says fail early but originally. So if you're going to make mistakes, inevitably everybody makes mistakes. But learn from those mistakes and just don't keep repeating the same mistakes. You'll make other mistakes, but at least learn from them and move forward. So we did that, and we hired in some people who were from industry who were a lot more knowledgeable about the processes, the scale up, the clinical trials, etc. And we got going. So I learned a tremendous amount in this company. It was not quote unquote my company as such. I was a technology founder. I was a young student, so my ownership stake was pretty small. I got exposed to all kinds of areas. If I had gone and joined a large company, I would get a very narrow window of view. Here, every place I could get into. I could be involved with the clinical trials, I could be in the scale up and the animal studies and meeting the doctors and talking to them. And so I got a very broad exposure. So once I had that and I had successfully helped them take the product through FDA approval and take the company public, I then realized that there was a bunch of technology that they were not doing anything with. I asked if they would spin that out and give it to me, and I would give them a portion of my company that I would like to start because I couldn't get them to do it within the company. Um, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to take that risk. So that's the seminal moment. There was a crossroads that I came to saying I can either continue to complain about this and show up for work every day and mourning the fact that they're not listening to me and they should do this, they should do that. I said, if I really believe that this is something worth doing, you know, let me actually just go do it. Why do I need to keep asking people for permission? Let's come up with some new technology. So I came up with some technology with another gentleman who was a co-founder of Focal and worked at Just Live. He was a postdoc by the name of Dr. Chandrasekhar Pathak. We came up with two component-based mixtures, which would polymerize, sort of like epoxy as opposed to UV adhesives, in a crude industrial analogy. So these materials polymerized, and we could do everything the same way. So we invented an alternative platform. And this time we said, we're not going to put it into one company, but we're going to put it into a holding company from which we will license for field specific applications into operating companies. That will allow us to continue to create many companies because one company only has the capital to execute on a small sliver of technology and the rest of it dies on the vine. And they won't give it to you. People have this, feeling that I'm losing something by giving it to somebody else. So having had that problem happen to me at Focal, I decided I'm not going to repeat that mistake. I even spoke a lot to the UT licensing offices and Paulette Brottigam, who was there. We tried to get the technology back out and they wouldn't give it to us. Once somebody has something, they don't want to give it back to you. So I realized that I was going to start becoming a negative minded, complaining kind of a person. And that's not me. I said, I'm a positive, action oriented person. So no hard feelings. I learned a lot. It was a great relationship. I don't want to sour it, but I want to move on. So I moved on and we came up with this new two component based systems. And we created, that was my first company, which we called Confluent Surgical. And we came up with sealants for brain surgery. And then we put the rest of the technology in the holding company, Incept. And from Incept, we've now created 8 companies that have come out from that based on this hydrogel technology and about a dozen others which are based on other principles. So that kind of gave me the leverage to go and start doing things on my own. So going from the academic lab to the to a startup, I think there is friends and family that were involved. They gave me, several $100,000 of money that we raised to initially get going. There were people who believed and mentors. My partner, who became my partner and initially was a mentor, was very important. And then I think just yourself, if you believe in it and you see that there is a big need and you can do something about it, just go do it. I think because if you keep asking people for permission, it's not going to come. You just have to start making the dream so real that everybody wants on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And given the, the COVID-19 pandemic and our approach to solving a global crisis, do you think that the current climate for, for people who want to start new companies in therapeutic development, do you think it's become easier or more difficult, or at least for you, going through the whole process of FDA approval and the technicalities of it all? I feel like, from my observations, the pandemic has fast-tracked a lot of the biotechnologies. So what do you think from your opinion?
So, yeah, the pandemic has had an effect of kind of creating a little bit of haves and have-nots to some extent. The gaps have become larger, whether it's economic disparity that we might have or opportunity disparity. Largely, it has been favorable for healthcare, health tech type of companies, med tech, biopharma, biotech companies. Reason for that is it is a healthcare crisis that people are encountering. And a lot of the chains of how progress is made in medtech and biotech is that there are suppliers and there are contract vendors and preclinical testing houses and CROs, etc. So you can run a somewhat virtual organization. It can't be all virtual, but it can be somewhat virtual. So we've had, in general, while for sales, there has been some impact in that, for example, I have a couple of companies that I've been involved with, Ocular Therapeutics that I founded, which was an ophthalmology company delivering drugs to the eye. When you can't have your salespeople actually go in to see doctors, the sales process suffers, but it's come back as the restrictions have sort of been taken away. It's come back. Same thing was at a company that I'm on the board of, my partner runs, called Imperative Care, where we are developing systems that go deep into the brain to pull clot out. And again, these are highly technical things. The salespeople and the technical specialists need to work with the physicians to introduce the products. So it was a problem when you were not allowed in, but now they are being allowed in, and the sales are doing quite nicely. Raising capital has not been a problem. There is plenty of capital around. So in fact, we just announced one of my other companies that I'm on the board of, Axtria. We raised $150 million a couple of weeks ago. And I think Imperative Care will be soon raising a large round also. And I closed a couple of rounds of financing for my company. So the capital is out there. In terms of making progress, our employees, finding employees, interviewing people just on Zoom and stuff like that, that was a little challenging. We are running clinical trials in one of my other companies where we're developing a liquid embolic, or a material that basically shuts down blood flow to tumors. It's a liquid material that polymerizes exceedingly rapidly within a fraction of a second and goes down to the capillary level to shut down blood flow. And we're running a 25-site trial in 3 different countries. And the regulations, if you have to go to Taiwan, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. You can't get out of your hotel. So needless to say, we haven't enrolled many patients in Taiwan. Australia, pretty tough also. So that has suffered. But the US, we've got some sites that are enrolling. So we're kind of, blocking and tackling and making our way through. Some new ideas that might be kind of COVID related have gotten certainly a jump start in that regard. And I think those have been fast tracked. So I think it is, on the whole, I think it's not made a huge impact on us and has been by and large favorable. But I think technology sectors and all, as well as biopharm, biotech has been okay. Services sectors and stuff have obviously suffered more.
Yeah. And so from your, you've talked a lot about the challenges and the motivations that you've had to overcome to get where you are. So for current, chemical engineering undergrads or grad students who are interested in entrepreneurship, especially international students who might, have to go through the same challenges as you did, what sort of advice would you give them given the current climate?
So I think, the world has changed a little bit since my time, where this whole concept of immigration and visas and all of this was a little bit more foreign, particularly in the space that we were in. But I think, so I don't think that should hold back international students. In fact, I was just talking to a young engineer yesterday who did his biomedical engineering and then in Ireland, and then did his master's at MIT over here, and was coming to me saying, do you have any suggestions? And this guy, literally where he came, he's a dual citizen for sure, and that helped. But he bought a one-way ticket from Ireland to the US. He didn't buy a return ticket. He said, I'm coming here, I'm coming where the action is, and I'm going to find something. And hats off to him. He had the commitment, and he sort of went in and he found something at Harvard and Children's Hospital, spent a couple of years here, and he's graduating. And this guy is tenacious. The thing is, he's not afraid to ask. He's not afraid to put himself out there, take some risk. So that's the advice that I would give. as foreign students, as recent immigrants, I can sometimes say that a man who has nothing to lose. So you don't have anything to lose. Take some risk. When are you going to take risk in your life? When you're old? Meaning, take it now. What do you have to support? I mean, you're not going to starve. You've got a degree from UT. So you're going to figure something out, but take a risk now before you have too many obligations of family and kids and stuff like that, because all of those then make you more risk averse later on. So at that point in time, it becomes a little harder. So I would say entrepreneurship, is more of a frame of mind, being comfortable with a little bit of risk, having a little bit of a chip on your shoulder saying, I am the smartest person in the room and I want to show you that kind of a thing. Seeing some problem and having a burning level of dissatisfaction saying, why can't somebody do something better? And I know what should be done. Well, if you do, then go do it, kind of a thing. And having that ability to communicate this passion to other people, to get them to join in your journey and get them to see what the future could be and what the experience could be like and what a fun journey it could be. And then once you have that, go talk to people. They'll be willing to fund you. There's many avenues nowadays. There are many angel groups. There are various types of early venture groups, etc. There are grants available. Just go start making it happen.
Awesome. That's great advice. For sure. I feel like half the battle is being able to communicate your passion and marketing yourself. There are great scientists out there, but many of them suffer from like imposter syndrome and have this, big fear of being rejected. And so that's really great advice.
Remember that there is, it's funny that you speak about the imposter syndrome, because I myself suffer from that. Meaning, when you look at it, like, a couple of years ago, I was inducted into the National Academy of Engineering. And then the next year, they let you kind of vote on who else to let in. And you look at these people, guys who've like had involved with every Mars mission since then. And I'm looking and saying, how do I even compare? Why am I here compared to these people who have made such a massive impact on science and technology? So you always feel that you're really not worthy, but I think also don't undersell yourself in that, because there is a thing about not being brash and arrogant, but there is also, if you don't believe, you don't have to be, a jerk about it, but having a level of confidence, quiet, understated confidence, and people pick up on that. People pick up that this is a genuine person who wants to do good and has a value system by which he or she is governed, and will be trustworthy, may not succeed, but will give it the best that they have. That's all you can ask for. So I think once you have that ability to communicate, people will pick it up. You don't have to be, Elon Musk with making all kinds of radical comments every day to be an entrepreneur. That's just a way outlier type of a person. There are lots of other good, hardworking people who are, genuine and are very successful in making things happen. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of airtime gets taken up by folks like that, and people feel that you have to fit that particular profile. While the quiet people who are executing and actually delivering great value and good products and services are sometimes not as celebrated or recognized, but they're out there. And so don't let that kind of throw you off and make you feel like an imposter.
Yeah, and it's great that people like you can recognize that and see that. So so my last question for you is, if you can think of any like the most memorable thing for you as a student at UT, and what were your favorite things about, I guess, the city, or if you can remember from around that time?
Yeah, no, I think, look, I had a great time. I think those are some of the best years of my life. The 5-6 years that I spent at UT were just definitely some of the best. And one of the best memories I had was I belonged to the sailing club. And we would go sailing every Saturday, and I would drive my beat up little Volkswagen Rabbit, and we would go to the lake and we'd sail and just have a great time. And some of my memories from that, and I got to meet a lot of different types of people that way. So outside of engineers, I had some great friends in radio, television, film, which UT's got a great program in, and people in biology and stuff like that. So I got to meet a very different side of campus with common interests of sailing. And so that I think was one of my my real favorite memories.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel the same. I tell people that graduate school has been like the best years of my life, and they're just like, "You're crazy. It's so difficult." And why would you say that? But it's truly transformative. It truly is.
In fact, I had reached this situation where towards the my fourth year or so, when you finished up with all your courses and stuff, and I can realize that the department is continuing to pay fees of this 12 credits every semester called research. So I asked around saying, do we need to keep paying the university for this stuff? And they say, yeah, well, that's a requirement. So, well, next question is, if you're going to pay them, can I take something else? Like instead of just this research, which I am going to do the research anyway, but can I take something else? They said, well, nobody's ever asked that, but yeah, why not? I don't see why not. So I decided I would take volleyball. I took ballroom dancing. I took scuba diving. So I had a great time, so I was down in that deep end of the pool with, I used to have long hair and stuff, and it's like unraveling and going up. I got scuba certified, and I played volleyball, and I learned the Louisiana tush push and whatever else that they had to offer, and it was great. There's so much of other stuff that the university has to offer, and we sometimes don't get perspective of that. So I use those credits well.
That's great. Yeah, for sure. UT especially has a lot of great extracurricular activities, and it's so multidisciplinary. You learn so much just meeting new people from different departments, and it's incredibly diverse. So you definitely feel like at home, not at home, but you feel more accepted and welcome. So
absolutely. I have some good memories of intramural inner tube water polo that we used to play. It was a good time.
That's awesome. Well, Amar, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to meet you, and I look forward to hearing more about your company's growth and your success. And you're definitely an inspiration to me and many chemical engineering students. And I hope, you shed a light of what it's like, post-grad, what the future can be like.
And there's more than one way to make a living. There's more than one way to make a living. You don't have to, you can take charge of your own destiny. And if you take charge of your own destiny, you never have to look towards somebody else for permission.
Yeah. But thank you again. I guess this will conclude the interview. If you have anything else you want to say, or but we can.
No, I think I enjoyed it all. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I think I have come out on campus a few times and tried to kind of make the point that I sort of accidentally found this way, but there is another way. We don't have to just take up jobs and stuff. We can kind of control our own things, and everybody that is working on cool ideas, you can actually implement them. So let's go figure out how we can translate some of the work we're doing within the academic lab, the brilliant work we're doing, and transform it into real products that help people. So I really appreciate what UT has given me as a springboard to be able to do, and I be happy to help anybody or talk to any of the students and stuff. Feel free to reach out.
That's great. Yeah.